Hi everyone, welcome back to day 5. I'm really tired, so let's get right into it. The fifth story. The Marchioness of Montferrat, with the aid of a chicken banquet and a few well-chosen words, restrains the extravagant passion of the King of France. As they listened to Dioneo's story, the ladies at first felt some embarrassment, which showed itself in the modest blushes that appeared on all their faces. Then, glancing at one another and barely managing to restrain their laughter, they giggled as they listened. When it came to an end, however, they gently rebuked him with a few well-chosen words in order to show that stories of that kind should not be told when ladies were present. Then the queen turned to Fiammetta, who was sitting on the grass next to him, and indicated that it was her turn to continue. Whereupon, with a cheerful smile towards the queen, she gracefully began. Whereas men, if they are very wise, will always seek to love ladies of higher station than their own, women, if they are very discerning, will know how to guard themselves from accepting the advances of a man who is of more exalted rank. For which reason, and also because of the pleasure I feel at our having, through our stories, begun to demonstrate the power of a good repartee, I have been prompted to show you, fair ladies, in the story that I have to tell, how through her words and actions a gentlewoman avoided this pitfall and guided her suitor clear of its dangers. The Marquis of Montferrat was a man of outstanding worth, who had sailed as gonfalonier, French again, of the church with a Christian host on a crusade to the Holy Land, and one day, during a conversation about his merits at the court of King Philip, who was also preparing to leave France to join the crusade, a courtier observed that there was not a wedded couple under the sun to compare with the Marquis and his lady. For just as the Marquis was a paragon of all the knightly virtues, so the lady was a more beautiful and worthy of esteem than any other woman in the world. These words left such a deep impression on the French king's mind that without having ever seen the lady, he at once became fervently enamored of her, and decided that under no circumstances would he embark for the crusade at any other port but Genoa, so that, by travelling overland, he would have a plausible pretext for paying the Marchioness a visit. In this way he thought he would succeed, since the Marquis would be absent in bringing his desires to fruition. He lost no time in putting his deep-laid scheme into effect. Having sent all his men on ahead, he set out with a small retinue of nobles, and as they approached the territory of the Marquis, he sent word to the lady, a day in advance, that she was to expect him for breakfast on the following morning. Being an intelligent and judicious woman, she sent back a message to say that she was glad to have been singled out for this uniquely great favor, and that the king would be very welcome. She then began to wonder why such a great king should be calling upon her in her husband's absence. Nor was she wrong in the conclusion that she reached, namely, that he was being drawn thither by the fame of her beauty. Nevertheless, with her habitual nobility of spirit, she made ready to entertain him, and after summoning all of the few remaining gentlemen of rank, acting upon their advice, she issued instructions for the necessary preparations to be made, at the same time insisting that she alone would arrange the banquet and devise its menu. Without a moment's delay, she collected together all the hens that could be found in the neighborhood, and ordered her cooks to prepare a series of dishes, using these alone for the royal banquet. The king arrived on the day he had appointed, and was warmly and honorably received by the lady. On meeting her for the first time, he was greatly amazed to find that she was even more beautiful, intelligent, and gentle-mannered than he had been led to expect from the words of the courtier, and he was lavish with his compliments, for he had become all the more inflamed with passion on finding that the lady exceeded his expectations. After he had rested for a while in rooms that had been richly appointed with all the furnishings appropriate to the reception of so great a king, it was time for the banquet, and the king sat with the Marchioness at one table, while the remaining guests were entertained at other tables according to their rank and quality. The king, being served with many dishes one after another, and with choice and precious wines, and gazing contentedly from time to time at the beautiful Marchioness, was filled with intense pleasure. But as one dish was followed by the next, he began to feel somewhat perplexed, for he could not help noticing that although the courses were different, each and every one of them consisted solely of chicken. He was well enough acquainted with that particular region to know that it should be well stocked with a variety of game, and by sending the lady advance notice of his arrival, he had given her ample time to organize a hunt. But although he was greatly surprised by all this, he had no desire to give her any cause for embarrassment, except for putting in a word about her chickens. So smiling broadly, he turned towards her and said, "Madame, is it only hens that flourish in these parts, and not a single cock?" The Marchioness, who understood his question perfectly, saw this as exactly the kind of heaven-sent opportunity she had hoped for in order to make clear her intentions. On hearing the king's inquiry, she turned boldly toward him and replied, "No, my lord, but our women, while they may differ slightly from each other in their rank and the style of their dress, are made no differently here than they are elsewhere." On hearing this, the king saw clearly the reason for the banquet of chickens, and the virtue that lay concealed beneath her little homily. He realized that honey words would be wasted on a lady of this sort, and that force was out of the question. And thus, in the same way that he had foolishly become inflamed, so now he wisely decided that he was honor-bound to extinguish the ill-conceived fires of his passion. Fearing her replies, he teased her no further, but applied himself to his meal, by now convinced that all hope was lost. And as soon as he had finished eating, in order to compensate for his dishonorable coming by his swift departure, he thanked her for her generous hospitality, and departed for Genoa, with the lady wishing him Godspeed. The end of the 5th story. I don't really understand it either, but I'm sure it's hilarious if you're born in the 14th century. So, they're not all going to make much sense. See you tomorrow.